Welcome to this session on literary agents. We have a panel of three very distinguished and successful agents with us. Mita Kapur from CIHI, Jayapriya Vasudevan from Jacaranda, Kanishka Gupta from Writer's Side, and I'm from a suitable agency. So, you have all been literary agents for over 2 decades or more. When you began, agents were the sort of new kids on the Indian block. Now they are a very familiar part of publishing. So, Mita, will you start? What prompted you to set up CIHI? And what are all the changes that you've seen from your setting up to today? And particularly, let us also talk about how contracts have changed.
Thank you, Ranjana. It's lovely to see all of you here. Thank you for skipping lunch and being here with us. Well, CIHI started, it was just sheer serendipity for me because having been one of the founders of the Jaipur Literature Festival, I was already in touch with the industry and I was already giving a lot of feedback to a lot of creative writers, just like as passion, you know. And I had lunch with a very senior editor in Jaipur from Little Brown, UK. And he said, you know, Mita, you're just such an idiot. What you're doing is what agents do. You know, you're just like using your own potential for nothing. I said, okay, let's do it. And I had already been aware that there's a lot of good writing that's happening in our country. And I know that publishers are overworked and all of that. I said, okay, let's just create some home ground for and equalize it for our writers here. And it was just on that whim that I started CIHI. Within the first 2 weeks, everybody said, don't take on a poet. But my first deal was a double book deal for a poet. And the second author was again a double book deal for literary fiction. And we've just grown organically after that. So it was just, I kind of just fell into it. And
all good things, yeah.
Yeah, it's just been an amazing journey. The changes we've seen, one, what I really liked about the Indian publishing industry was that whether it's in English language or the languages, they respected and realized the growing need to have a conduit like a literary agent in the scene. I mean, in the West, the culture always has existed, but here it was basically given the way our Indian culture works, you know, the sense of patronage continues. So, you know, somebody would call somebody and say, oh, I know this person, he's written a book or she's written a book, can you look at it? That's how publishing was working. Literally, your authors would just walk up to publishers directly. You know, the awareness of intellectual property rights and to, you know, kind of protect what you're doing as your creativity is very, very important. And I sense there's an enormous need in the country. So we began with looking after everything. The changes, I mean, we started with just publishing, print publishing, agenting for print publishing, but we have now separated audiobooks, we've separated merchandising rights, we've separated, obviously language rights have always been separate, but screen adaptation rights. So we are working on all spheres, not just in India, but the world over. So those are the kind of transitions that we've made. And it's very interesting to see that there is so much happening in every playing field. And there's so much change and advancement and openness and experimentation. It's a very nice, playful, whimsical time for us and our writers.
The last 2 decades have in fact been terribly eventful. In fact, Jayapriya, when did you set up Jacaranda, and what changes since have you seen in the role of a literary agent? Nowadays, I mean, looking at all the stuff that Mita has mentioned, it is fairly complex.
So I'm going to sort of reveal how old I am by the statement. When I started Jacaranda, email was new. I was getting submissions that were printed out spiral bound and sent to me, and wading through piles of books. I needed a separate room just to read things. So I started. I was number one. I was the very first agent. I had to learn from myself.
Wow.
There was nobody who told me what to do. And like Mita, it sort of happened by itself. I ran a bookstore. I knew writers. I knew publishers. And, to create a path between them was easy enough. And I come from a publishing family. My father and grandfather were journalists. I was born above a printing press. So writing is in my blood. Reading is in my blood. So it seemed a very normal thing to do, to continue to work in the field of writing. But I'm going to take it away a little bit. I want to talk about the changes. So when I started, there was nobody who was doing what I did, nobody to tell me what to do. I put out a call and we got more than 40 manuscripts in 1 week. And from those 40 manuscripts, I took on 9 with an editor friend. I did not do this alone. And I sold not all at the same time, but all to Penguin, one by one. And I had to deal with the distrust of publishers who didn't know what an agent was. Do we have to pay you for this? And I'm saying, no, you don't. I bring you books edited, ready to go, and all you have to do is buy it. But I insisted on advances. I learned how to read a contract from ground zero. I didn't know what it was. And one of my very first writers said, I don't like this contract. Can I buy the company? And she could have. She could have. But, looking at the changes, I think the biggest change I see is, the ease of doing business that we were talking about. So yes, there have been so many changes in the industry, independent bookstores going away, the big chains coming in, retail becoming harder and harder, distribution having such a hold over publishing in every way. We're ruled by distribution. The person who makes money in publishing is really the distributor, nobody else. But also we've seen a changing landscape with taxation and law and freedom of speech. And those are things we have to be mindful of, because we have that horrible indemnity clause in every contract anywhere in the world. So quick aside, I do business in many parts of the world. I run the agency out of Singapore. I live in India, in Bangalore. So I work with a large Indian list. But, we have to deal with taxation laws in so many territories and geographies. It's not easy to do business in India, I'll tell you that. Oh. And it's not. So I prefer to lose money and run the agency from Singapore than actually set up a more formal company here. But I think the biggest thing we're all dealing with is some kind of censorship. You have to filter so much of what comes to you. You have to look at it so carefully. You've got to deal with all these clauses in every single contract which says, what? If this goes to court, it's not on me. It's not on me. So I think that's the biggest change, is freedom of speech, I feel.
Yeah, I think that is significant. Kanishka, writer's side has had a very successful stable of fiction and non-fiction writers. What are the major changes you have seen in English language publishing during your time? And would you agree that one of the things that we are now very careful about as agents is the kind of manuscripts that you send out to publishers?
Careful in what sense?
In the sense that will it fit in with their sort of sense?
So when I started out as an agent, we didn't have too many mainstream publishers. Maybe there was Penguin, which started operations long ago, and HarperCollins and Rupa. But after 2009, a lot of MNCs started their Indian subsidiaries. And it started making sense as a business model, that if you have a larger number of publishers in India who are who want to set up a local publishing division, then there will be competition, for authors, and that kind of increases the stakes, the financial stakes. So my biggest struggle as an agent has been to win the trust of publishers, because I don't come from a publishing background. I haven't even worked in a publishing house. And for me, the key, the turning point was signing up an author, the first author who's good, because I thought if I start pitching, bad manuscripts to publishers without the publishers even knowing what where I come from, what's my background, it's going to be very difficult for me to sustain, this business. So I discovered Anis Salim, and he ended up winning a lot of prizes. And initially, I was also very clueless about contracts, because publishers used to ask me to signed separate agreements with the authors. For the commission, they did not want to include an agency clause in the contract between the publisher and the author. I don't know whether Mita and Jayapriya, you've experienced this. And then there were some publishers who used to tell me that they do not pay advances as a policy, and which I found out a few years down the line that was not true. So, and I did not know anything about publishing, anything about, agenting, but I learned a lot of things on the job. And I think what has given me success is the fact that we are quite genre agnostic, that in India you cannot afford to focus on one genre. Like in the US, UK, you have these agents who are like big in the speculative fiction space. There are agents who are only focused on romance. There are agents only who are focused on, big political biographies, autobiographies. In India, you have to be genre agnostic. And for that to happen, you have to keep your own personal taste aside and have a team of people who read across genres. So I also rely a lot on my, editors who may be the right fit for the kind of book that I may not be able to champion. In terms of the changes, I think the advances have gone up. I'm approached by authors who do not need agents. This never used to happen like 7 or 8 years ago when I used to rely a lot on No.
Yeah, published authors have come to us always.
No, I'm talking. No, but in my case, yeah. Look, I'm talking about my experience. So I don't rely a lot on slush piles, even though we look at all interesting new manuscripts. But I think a lot of authors who don't need agents, they are coming to agents because they see the kind of value
I think they
add.
see some advantages in having someone who can do the negotiating for them.
But the biggest issue that I face as an agent, and I don't know if Jayapriya and Mita face the same issue, is that where does the role of an agent end? Why are we supposed to be, pitching authors to festivals? Why are we supposed to doing the work of PR people if they are not doing their work? So where does that role end? Because we are not going to get extra commission for that. I don't know what your thoughts on that are, but I sometimes feel that this is something that we need to define in our contracts with authors. I've seen that on your website, and I wanted to share that you're on the Jacaranda website, you've written that we don't pitch to festivals, and I thought, yeah, that's the right thing. So that's one thing. About the contracts, yes, I'm very particular about subsidiary rights, especially if the author has connections with the film world, or they are screenwriters, because a lot of screenwriters, they tend to graduate to writing novels. We try to define the term of the contract. We try to keep the rights restricted to South Asia unless the publisher can give us a very good reason why they want to hold on to UK, US rights, even if they don't intend to pitch aggressively. And yes, in terms of like during COVID, I made a concession to this. So we were because publishers were struggling and nobody knew what was going to happen. I signed a lot of contracts, and I encouraged my authors to sign a lot of contracts where all the advance was to be paid on the publication of the book, and that was the exception I made because of the extraordinary times we were living in. So yeah, and I also feel that now authors know about agents. They are very, they can also be competitive. They'll give us deadlines. That I've got offers from 2 other agents and get back to me by such and such time.
I can't deal with those.
Yeah, but that's they are conducting an auction.
I think that's also one of the sort of consequences, or the fact that agenting is comparatively, and I say comparatively because it has been going on for 25 years, new here. So we're still setting boundaries.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons why I end up signing a lot of promising writers, debut writers, even non-fiction writers, is because we are very invested editorially, and I think that is the kind of hand-holding they expect. They expect the agents to be their first reader. They expect the editors to be editorially involved. And then they expect their editors to find the right editor for them, because in India, in major publishing houses like Penguin, HarperCollins, and even some of the smaller big MNCs, there are a lot of editors who are commissioning in the same space, Yeah. But that, and then the agent has to decide who will be the right editor for the author, because it's a very long-term relationship between an editor and an author. So I think that's very important.
And I think that's something we need to discuss now. What is the relationship among the things you mentioned right now? is that is there an end to it? I mean, after you pitch the thing, does it stop? Do you
No,
think
it
stops?
doesn't.
And moreover, should it stop?
I don't know. I come from, maybe I'm a little, I'm a purist. And for me, once an author is a part of Syahi, then we walk the entire journey with them. So, whether it's, obviously, editorially, we are very, very focused on each book that we are putting out or pitching out. That goes without saying, like, that's a given. But even contractually, making sure that each clause is vetted and everything, like the amount of red marks on my track changes on every contract that goes back to the publisher with my demands for my authors, is like, I tell them, you guys know that I will function this way, so why don't you just do the changes and send them to me? Why are you sending me a standard template? So that, and then the marketing and visibility, monitoring the royalty statements, figuring out sales figures. If somehow the royalty sales statements don't add up for me, I question each publisher. कि भाई, पिछले महीने में we had 4 events. Average of 50 books, 60 books were sold, or 200 books were sold. Why aren't the figures kind of matching? What are you guys doing with the sales? Or if I'm traveling and if I don't find my author's books at certain stores, whether it's 4 in the morning for my international flight or anything, all my publishers get messages, whatever time of the day or night, why is this book not at this store? What are you people doing? So that's a constant practice. And I think we also go back to promoting our backlist all the time. We are not supposed to be publicists for our authors. Technically, those boundaries should be there the way they are there in the West. But you also have to work from within the ecosystem of the country that we are in.
That is true.
We are still in publishing, we are still struggling to make a mark in the international market. We're still struggling to make a mark in our own market. So the least you can do is stand by your authors. So when it comes to kind of like pushing them, pushing the publisher, making sure that the book remains on the bookshelf. And when I say remains on the bookshelf, I mean metaphorically, it remains alive and sales are steady and constant, and it's not just the burst of the first 3 months of marketing that everybody tends to do. But we keep going back and we keep strategizing. So visibility across, whether it's social media, print journalism is barely there for books anymore, so let's not talk about that. But for me, my authors then become a part of an extended family. And I have actually saved some people's marriages, and also
I wish I could have done that too.
I've had therapy sessions. I've kind of been like a shrink to my authors. I've also advised their children through their romances and heartbreaks. So yeah, it becomes like a package deal for us, because that's the culture we are in. We've got to be there for our authors. Simple.
Well, I think that's important, but I mean, since you have this on your website, do you feel authors' expectations of agents are realistic or not? And where would you kind of put a line as to what they can ask you and what they can't?
So I do not do PR directly. I don't, because we're too small. We're 4 women, 1 man. There are 5 of us in the agency. We're too small to give, publicity is a very separate thing. Having said that, we support everything the publisher and the author do. We look for ideas and we send it to the publisher or to the author. We're not going to do it directly. But I do agree with what Mita says that, I work with writers who do more than 1 book. So my journey with them is just it's not finite in that sense. Like if you look at Anjum Hassan, look at Nishat Susan, look at Paro, they're already doing more than 1 book. So so Tiffany Sau, who's like my biggest star, Indonesian writer, I've worked with her for 12 years and we do a book every year. So while, again, going back to Mita's point, you're looking at the backlist while you're also looking at what you're pitching. Everything is working all the time, but I don't want a new writer to come and expect us to be their publicists. I am a literary agent. I'm in charge of their book. I'm going to make the best deal possible, have the book in the best shape possible, be their champion, but not do their publicity because it's a separate game.
So I'm part of all the marketing plans. I also help my authors choose between like two options. If they get an invite for an event on the same day, or if they have to choose between 2 or 3 interviews, I'll give my advice. But what I was coming at was that it's not right for authors to expect us to directly pitch. That we are directly pitching like to a festival director unless the festival director has reached out to us and shown interest in the book. I think that's the thing which is, and I don't mind doing it for my author. I'm just saying that those boundaries need to be defined.
Yeah. I mean, I think there has to be some kind of formalization of how far you can go. And if you want to go further, that's up to you. But it cannot be an expectation.
Also, it varies a lot. It's like even JP is saying she's got even we are just me and 3 more girls in my team. Kanishka also has a small team. It's just about what defines you as a team leader, and a lot of that gets reflected into the way the rest of the team takes on the spirit and functions with. So you define your own boundaries, and if an author is coming to you, the author is coming to you with full faith and trust, so they better listen to you. I make sure my authors listen to me. Like they get it from me if they don't listen to me. So it's as simple as that.
I think all of us have our own strengths, and I think we.
What do you think are the important new areas that you're tackling now? I mean, I know languages, translations. Is that more part of your rubric than it was before? Kanishka?
So a few years ago, there was a lot of pressure on me to sell rights to like film producers, OTT. But now I think the authors have also realized that very few books that are optioned see the light of day. And that option money is almost as high or low as an advance you get for a work of non-fiction, significant work of non-fiction, because the majority of the payment that will come to an author on the sale of their book rights, will come once the film or the OTT is shot or once it's set for release. So I see that now authors are realizing that that's very difficult. So, but for like 2 or 3 years, there was a lot of pressure on me to, go to Bombay, to reach out to producers, directors, which I continue doing. But we tend to wait for, producers, directors to reach out to us with an interest in a book, and then we like do the negotiations. After Daisy won the Booker Prize, there was a lot of pressure on me to, and I hope I'm not sounding negative, pressure on me. I mean, there was a lot of I was being approached to sell rights overseas, and in fact, I was at the Frankfurt Fair a few months after Tomb of Sand won the Booker, and I felt that there was a lot of interest and openness to read these manuscripts. But 6 months after the fair, I could not sell any rights. So I think it's about how editors react to a book, whether it's Tomb of Sand or whether it's any other translation from Tamil, Kannada. And I did manage to sell some of the backlist titles, Daisy's backlist titles, and I sold 3 or 4 books this year. But it's not what happened after Arundhati won the Booker Prize, or there was so much interest in writers from India, and new writers were getting these massive $1 million deals. That did not happen. So, but translators and writers writing in Bhasha languages, they are very interested in international rights. Like they would like their books to be published in the UK, US. They would like their books to be translated into foreign languages. And some of them, I've also come across a trend where a lot of academic writers writing serious but accessible non-fiction, they would like their works to be translated into Indian languages. I've seen that,
Yeah.
So like Rohit Day, for instance, he did a book on the Constitution and he reached out to me for translations in multiple languages. And it's not very hard to sell those rights because many of them have support from the university, so they can offer grants for translation. That's another interesting but not a major trend that I've seen.
I did Sapiens in 5 Indian languages, and for Mitch album, 15 contracts in Indian languages, and I'm going to do now a crime novelist in a few Indian languages. But these are, it's only the bigger books that will make it across into Indian languages. They have to be major because a lot of India reads in English. The kind of books that people want translated, we still read them in English, and that's the thing. But I've been successful in selling translated literature to America. It's not been Europe, it's not been the UK, but to America, I think that I've sold some good translated literature for decent money, and it continues. So the translators bring us the stories. I can't read in the languages I work in. They bring us the stories, but I think there's a huge interest in diversity, and they want to see the success of that book in the original language for it to travel. But there is interest. I think the trend in translation is both ways right now. So, authors wanting to be published in India, not just in English, but in languages. And authors from here, whichever language they write in, want to be published in several languages in several parts of the world.
Would you say that's also true of voices from the rest of South Asia, Mita? I know you publish a lot from.
We do have quite a few nationalities in our stable. Translations has been something that when I started Syahi, it was one of the ideals, and I still stick with that ideal, that the market we have in our languages in India remains unexploited. I think we have the numbers in this country. We just have to have a system where publishers in different languages have enough money to pay for quality translations. That is where the buck stops, because then quality translations and interlanguage translations and then translations into English, we have the numbers within our country. We just need to figure out a way to tap into that market, and then the whole debate comes back to what are we doing for marketing, even if it's a translation, let's say from Tamil into English, or whether it's from English into Hindi. So those gaps still have to be closed. Having said that, we've got authors published into more than 40 languages for a particular book across India and then abroad also. So the thirst is there, the desire is there, the intent is there. We just need to close the commercial gaps that we face, and things will really boom.
Yeah, well, it would be good to have something that would work.
Also, I think, I'm sorry to interrupt, but, in a lot of European translations, they are able to translate between languages quite seamlessly. You can sell a book in France, and then they will translate from French into Italian, into German, into Dutch. Yeah. In India, we're still using English as the bridge language. You're going to English to translate into other Indian languages. There are very few people who are fluent in 2 Indian languages, reading and writing. They may be able to speak 5, but reading and writing perhaps only 1 or 2.
Yeah, interlanguage translations become difficult in our country, but it depends. There are times where I've had this experience where I've had a publisher from the South ask me, not for the English translation, but the Hindi original. And I have made sure that text has been sent to them. And we've discussed the quality of translation. And it's been an amazing experience. It was the moment I got that call, I was so happy. I said, wow, this can happen. It's happening. But again, steady start, very slow start. But even, a book like that happens, it adds so much joy and gives us so much strength to carry on, hoping that it'll get better. I mean, that optimism is very required.
You wanted to add that.
I also wanted to share some of the observations that I made at the Frankfurt Book Fair about, West's perception of writings from South Asia. Number one, for non-fiction, I felt the publishers are getting more and more insular, very close to stories from the global South, and some of them had shown interest in some of the books I had pitched to them, but they felt that, they said to me very categorically that we have so many of our own issues. Why would our readership read this? And this was a very contemporary book on the recent Bangladesh crisis, and they really liked the book. Secondly, I also felt that most of the literary publishers, while they're still very keen on acquiring, translation rights to, books in Hindi, Bangla, Tamil, they're moving more towards, East, Far East. There's a huge interest in, Japanese, translations, Korean translations. That is something that they made very clear. And for the first time, at least 15 or 20 editors told me after going through my catalog that send us stuff, but send me one thing. Choose the 3 best things, 4th thing. This never used to happen before. Now the question about translations, I faced another issue with some of the translations that I was pitching to publishers, is that many international publishers, they do not want to translate from English, you know. Like I met a Polish publisher, they were interested in, Goat Days by Benjamin, but they said that we would like it to be translated from Malayalam to Polish, you know. And I met like a French publisher who would like a book in Kannada to be translated from Kannada to French, and how it's very difficult to find good translators. So that's another thing, that they do not want to translate from English.
Yeah, those are definite problems. But I think, having said that, what I think we need to share with the audience now is each of you tell them what is your advice to all new authors who are wanting to have agents, and what can you help them with? Each of you.
JP, you start.
I think for fiction, I think one should not be in a hurry to like send out half-baked drafts. Just work on your drafts, and if you feel that you may need help, then don't seek that help from friends and families, or like people who read a lot. There are a lot of freelance editors in India, and you'll find their details. They'll be happy to offer feedback, for a fee. And I think you should. I mean, the general submission hygiene should be taken care of, but I really don't go. I will never reject a submission if the author has sent me a Word file when I had asked for a PDF, and if it's a different font, and even if it has typos and all, it's fine. But if there is something special in the writing or the story, then we would definitely be interested. I think credentials are more important for works of non-fiction than fiction, but if you've won short story prizes, or if you've been nominated for some fellowships, or if you won some prizes for fiction, that's always good. And a lot of writers, they are also like contributing, fiction writers, new writers, they're also, a lot of them are contributing reviews, for publications. So just mention that in your bio. The bio should focus on your credentials as a writer. Don't make it too long. And the pitch has to be very concise, because if an author himself or herself cannot summarize what she's writing, or what he or she is writing, then it's going to be difficult for us to.
But how important are credentials, do you think, for non-fiction?
Well, very important. Most of my, I very, very important, because I sign up a lot of writers who are specialists in the area, or journalists who are known for long-form journalism and who have covered a particular subject or some sort of a trend for a very long time. A lot of my writers are New India Foundation fellows, so their proposals have been vetted by the best of the best non-fiction writers there are. So it's very important for credentials to matter.
I think so too. Mita, Jaya, just before we open it up.
So I'm going to jump into the other side of it. I presume that a writer will get their work in the best shape they can before they find an agent or a publisher. So if you have to find an agent, go and look at their list and see if you fit. If that agent suits your work, because it's a long-term relationship. So I'd say, like, do your homework, look at their website, look at the kind of books they do, look at the personality, and choose your agent carefully. That would be my advice. Take time to understand the agent's list, the agent's approach of working, and then, submit to them after that.
Well, I would combine what Jayapriya and Kanishka are saying, but what I would really request young writers, or whatever kind of writers, please do your research when you are writing, whether it's fiction or non-fiction. Your narrative has to be convincing. That voice has to really be appealing. And you need to know what JP just said. You need to know whether you fit into that category. And please don't be hasty in just sending us absolutely unpolished manuscripts. Even if, there's 1 in a million chance that your story is that great that we will turn around and say, okay, send me the whole book. That doesn't happen, and you're just reducing your chances in your hastiness of sending us a book or the first 3 or 4 chapters without realizing that you haven't really chiseled them as much as you can. So patience is something that you need to really learn in capital letters if you're getting into the world of getting your book published. Figure yourself out. And the worst thing that your authors do is they'll send it to publishers and agents simultaneously.
Sometimes on the same email.
And on the same email, yes. I mean, that is something that puts a red flag in my head immediately. What does it show me is your lackadaisical attitude, you're not bothered, you haven't done your research, that means you have no respect for our time. What is it? Like, why can't you just kind of figure yourself out? And for heaven's sake, if you're sending a book to an agent, wait for the agent to come back to you. We take time to read. If you're sending your book to publishers simultaneously, you're literally reducing your own chances of getting picked up, and you're increasing your chances of getting rejected, because the publisher will look at that half chiseled kind of writing and say,
No, but
who's
also
going to work on
potentially-
this book?
Also, Mita, potentially causing friction between the publisher and the agent if both of them are interested in the book, you know.
I've not faced that friction at all, because I just call people and say, boss,
So I think there should be
kitab
some
hai,
disclosure.
I know it's reached you, you want to do it, or let's talk about it, or whatever.
Well, I think
But,
also,
just the approach, we're also human. We are trying to be professional as much as we can. So respect our time. I'm not trying to sound high-handed or something, but send us a cleaned up proposal, send us a cleaned up pitch, make it succinct, make it like, I'm greedy. Every day I open my inbox, I'm still greedy after having worked for over 2 decades and having a 95% rejection rate. I'm still like, I'm so hopeful. I still have that faith that yes, the next one is going to be that one great thing that
well,
I'm
I
looking
think that's
for.
the lovely thing about being an agent is that you
Yes,
also get
it
to read a
is.
lot of really good
Yes,
stuff. Should
and
we open it up
so
for-
give me that joy. Your
Kanish,
pitch has to be clean.
you
Your
want to
synopsis has to be well written. Your brief has to be. I mean, your chapters have to be fantastic.
Please.
Cleaned up and everything. And don't be impatient, for heaven's
I'll just
sake.
take 30 seconds to say that one thing I've started doing now for very promising manuscripts, mostly works of fiction that need a lot of work, is that I share an offer of intent, like a letter of intent with the author. And I tell them that, if you just turn this around, like on your own or with the help of external freelance editor, and sometimes I recommend those editors to the author, then we are happy to like reconsider, take it on. In 8 or 9 out of 10 cases, we've signed up those authors, and in 90% of the time, we've sold the book, because this is like workshopping a book. It's not something that I can do on my own, at my expense. So,
Yeah, that's true. I think we need a lot more overt guidelines as to what actually should happen when you approach an agent. But anyway, before that, shall we just talk to everybody? Yeah.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Good afternoon, sir. Thank you for the wonderful session. I would like to ask one question: that how do you before choosing your manuscript, how do you understand the literary landscape of India or worldwide, and how do you avoid the conflict with your preferred genre or your preferred manuscript with that landscape?
What is the conflict?
So, means sometimes you have your own, preferred genre, preferred story, and how do you think that I like that manuscript, but it's not suiting the literary landscape currently? So, do you have that kind of conflict?
I think basically you need to basically
sellable,
see,
like
you
books are
need to
not
see
sellable,
what
then-
will say it. Yeah.
Yeah.
You need to consider that very carefully. Otherwise, it will not be accepted.
Yep.
Yeah. Next.
Hi guys. So this question is coming from a place of curiosity. So right now we see a trend with like big publishers that if an author has a huge Instagram or social media following, that then their books tend to get picked up more because there's already a audience base. So does that come into play in literary agencies also, that you tend to pick up books?
Yeah,
Kanishka, you take
it's
this
a
one.
really worrying trend. And you just said that books by Instagram writers, sometimes they're not even books. They just get a message from a publisher that write a book and the contract is signed. And I don't blame them, because they do have a big market. I have had these encounters, run-ins with these Insta stars, and I have stepped back on occasions when I felt that these are not writers. I mean, they have a lot of content, they have a lot of following, but I have not been able to. And one of the reasons why I don't represent too many like writers who become bestsellers, without having an agent, like going solo, is because then they make your life miserable, because they would expect an agent to put in too much work. And I've seen that in publishing in India, that very few agents have been able to hold on to, best-selling writers who come to them, after publishing books with other publishers. But yeah, this is a massive trend. And Prajakta Kohli, who's published with Harper, she's doing really, really well. I think she's sold more than 1 lakh copies. But so I tend to work with writers who have that sensibility of being a writer, regardless of their following.
That makes it. I think one last question for this gentleman.
Yeah, hi. So, I mean, in my attempt to socialize and circulate what I'm, what I've written and what I'm trying to pitch. In general, I've seen short story anthologies are not really picked up and are not at the top of the list. I mean, do you agree? And
No. I don't know. I spoke about it with somebody this morning. I don't know a single person who doesn't love a short story, but it's the hardest thing to sell. And I don't know. So, I use the same example at every workshop that I do. There's a book called A Visit to the Goon Squad, which is a very clever book. It's a book of interconnected short stories. I think whether it's short stories or not, it needs to feel like a novel, not like an anthology. Anthologies are always hard to sell because they're different things happening in the books. I would say, work on a themed short story book. Perhaps you'll have a better chance, But it's very hard to sell.
I would say short stories in India are harder to sell or as hard to sell as poetry. It's that bad. Yep. Unless it's an anthology, or like a
Or your
series of...
Chumpa Lahiri or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.